101 review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is a best selling British author and, of course, ever evolving human, no other than Mr. Keith A. Pearson.
Hello there. How are we doing?
I'm fabulous, fabulous like you, Mr. Keith. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
So my name is Keith A. Pearson, and I'm an author, an indie author from Surrey in the United Kingdom, and I've been writing since 2016, and to date I've published 19 full-length novels.
Mr. Keith A. Pearson, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. And we are hoping for more and more and more empowering books like this to come. So let's talk about your latest book, The Fourth Close. Can you tell
Yes.
us about it?
Okay, so it's the second book in a series. The series itself is called Echo Lane, and it's set in 1990, the year 1990, and it features a guy who becomes a real estate agent, and as part of that job, he stumbles upon a derelict, a deserted house, which actually transpires to be a time portal between 1990 and the year 2024. And he meets a woman who sets him a challenge. All he has to do is break up a relationship of a couple in 1990. And I probably won't say too much more than that because it would involve quite a few spoilers. But both books, so the first one is called No Easy Deeds, and the second one, the one that I've just released, The Fourth Clause, they both cover this: what happens when you mess around with time and the repercussions and how they ripple across the decades. So I think it relies on, obviously, time travel is, it's usually popular, but like a lot of my books, there's an element of nostalgia. I think once you get past the age of 40, maybe even 30, who knows, you start to sort of feel that pull, that nostalgic glow of the past. And sometimes it's a nice place to live, particularly in this day and age, in uncertain times and awful lot going on in the world. We find comfort in the past, I think.
Mr. Keith, why did you choose the title The Fourth Close? Is it literal, symbolic, or both?
Both, in actual fact. There is a contract that the protagonist Danny signs in the first book, and it is the fourth clause that becomes the reason why he has to continue his journey, his metaphoric journey in the second book. So it is in and actually, I like the alliteration. It's as a book title. It just sounds good. It's short, to the point, and it sort of just trips off the tongue, really. So there are other reasons beyond the sheer relevance of the name.
Did you always know there would be a second book in the Echo Lane series?
I did. In fact, I set off originally. This is the first book that I've actually penned, or series of books that with the pure intention of writing in a series, which has its complications because I do have other books that are in series, but they're standalone. So each story within the series is, you could pick it up and read it. You don't have to follow a story. This is the first time I've written a series that actually one book links into the other to the other. So both books have actually done exceptionally well, which gives me great confidence to keep writing them. As long as people keep reading them, enjoying them, and buying them, yeah, I'll keep writing them.
Definitely. And again, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. How has the tone or theme of the story shifted from book one to book two?
That's a very good question. I would guess the first book is more of about a scene setting. When you're starting off with a series, you need you're setting the protagonist off on a journey. There is with this particular book, with the first particular book, it was about fulfilling a challenge. The second book is about the consequences of what happens when you mess around with time. So as we move through the series, the idea is that the characters will develop. It gives you the good thing about writing in series is it gives you the ability to sort of explore various characters rather than just the protagonist and the antagonist. And that's been the difference. The key difference with the second book is the relationships with the protagonist. You're able to evolve those, make them or bring other characters into play, create new relationships, and it just becomes more character focused because the plot is already set from the first book. So it just gives you that scope, and then going forward, there will be subplots, and at some point the series will end. I'm not sure when, and then there will be an overarching story arc. As with all time travel, there has to come an end point where everything returns to some level of normality. When that happens, I'm not sure yet. Might be the next book, might be 5 books time. We shall see.
Hmm. So, Mr. Keith, let's talk about the plot and themes. Without giving too much away, what's the central conflict or mystery driving the fourth clause?
So the fourth clause, it relates to something that happened in the first book. What happened is that the protagonist Danny fulfilled a particular task that was set. It was more of a challenge. He was told that if he broke up this couple, a random couple in 1990, he would be given the deeds to a house, the mysterious house in the country that I referred to. Now, at the end of that book, without getting into any spoilers, things didn't quite pan out the way that Danny hoped. So the second book, the fourth clause, examines not so much the consequences of him not getting what he thought, but the repercussions of him interfering with this particular couple, and how those repercussions rippled across time. Back all the way to 2024, or forward to 2024.
Indeed, interesting, Mr. Keith. And how many series do you think you will make for this book?
How many volumes? I'm not sure.
Yes.
I think in my head I probably thought 5, but uh, at the end of the day, I'm at an age now where I've penned 19 novels,
Yes.
um, and I'm 53 now, and I think, well, how many more books do I write? And with all of, I think of this very much as a business. I enjoy writing, but ultimately it's I've got to produce what the readers want. And so there is a commercial element that is attached to this. If all of a sudden, 1 million people decide they want the next book, then they will absolutely get it. If it's 1,000, then I would probably have to think twice. So with all of these things, it's driven by demand as much as anything. As long as the appetite from readers is there, I'll keep writing. They're great. I love writing them. They're funny. They touch on a period of time where I was in my sort of late teens. So it's a period of life that I look back on with some fondness. So I love writing them, but the love of writing doesn't it on its own pay the bills, unfortunately. So yeah, we'll see what the readers think and want.
How does the story challenge your characters in a new ways in the fourth clause?
Well, that's the great thing about time travel is that you can open up all sorts of conflicts that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do in a standard storyline, because you can create almost anything. I mean, if it's the butterfly effect, isn't it? You can make one minor change today that, you know, 34 years into the past could have significant repercussions. So, in terms of how the story evolves, I was able to sit down at the beginning of this book, and I literally had a blank sheet of paper where I could take the characters anywhere. But that in itself is a challenge, because you can go off on such wild tangents with time travel that it's very easy then to sort of get yourself, you can head off in a direction and find yourself lost very quickly. With my very first book, that was Time Traveler, and I didn't plot it properly, because I didn't know what I was doing. And I probably wasted 30, 40,000 words there writing myself into corners that I couldn't get out of. So I then had to come back, delete huge amounts of text, and keep writing. So it's time travel is a great genre to write in because of the opportunity it presents for developing a story. But it's, yeah, you've got to handle it very carefully, because it can drag you anywhere and everywhere.
Totally agree with you, Mr. Keith. Let's talk about the characters and relationships. How
Mhm.
have the main characters grown since the first book?
Well, the when we were introduced to Danny, the protagonist is called Danny Monk. He's a guy in his, I think he's 30 years of age from memory. Um, and when the first book, it starts off with his situation, which is fairly dire. Basically, his fiance had split up with his fiance who cheated on him. He'd lost his job, and he was at real risk of losing the flat that he owned. I mean, back in the UK in 1990, the economic situation was pretty grim. Um, Lots of people owned properties, houses, flats, apartments, where their mortgage debt was more than the value of the actual property they owned. So you couldn't sell. All you could do, we had really high interest rates, 11, 12, 13%. So it was a really tough time economically. So Danny come into this first book, basically at his lowest ebb, emotionally, financially, and that's how he ended up becoming a real estate agent, just out of desperation, not because he wanted to do it. So from that perspective, the way he has evolved is that, certainly. Uh, I think it's fair to say that he isn't quite the pessimist as he enters into the fourth clause. His life had started to turn around. He'd started to get things back together. He'd kind of got over his ex fiance, so he comes into the fourth clause in a slightly better frame of mind than he was in the first book. But obviously, with any book, any novel, you need to recreate conflict. So suddenly, problems start appearing that he could never have predicted. He One of those key conflicts was from a character from the first book that he probably couldn't have imagined would come back to haunt him, but he does. So in terms of his evolution as a character, I think he's somebody like, I think you would call him. I don't know if it's a phrase that's used much beyond the UK, but he is a very much an everyman. So just an average Joe, I think is probably an American term that people are more familiar with. So he lives a fairly mundane life, gets up, goes to work, pays his bills. Nothing exceptional about him. And he's lived in this kind of rut for a while, and so suddenly he gets blown out of that rut, and he's facing a situation. I wonder how any of us would deal with a situation where we discover that time travel is actually possible. I mean, how much of that would we believe is real? How much of it would we think that we're losing our own minds? To experience, if for example one day you wandered into a house and suddenly looked out the window and you could see your hometown 34 years into the future, or your street or whatever it may be. I guess that would affect someone, and it certainly affects Danny, that's for sure.
Definitely. So, Mr. Keith, were any characters particularly difficult to write in this book?
um No, I don't think there were, because I actually in a similar period, I worked in real estate, so a lot of the characters were actually drawn from real people. They're people I knew, people I worked with. So they weren't particularly challenging because even though it was 30 odd years ago, I still have fairly fond memories of that time, and I actually still was speaking to. There's a secretary stroke receptionist in the book called Tina, who was based on a real person, and I still sort of chat with her fairly frequently. So they weren't challenging to write. I don't tend to, as a rule, I think if a character is challenging to write, um, are they the character that you necessarily want in your book? Because I think good characterization is, for me personally, I think it's fundamental, and I like to create and write characters that I have that resonate with me. So because if you can put yourself in the mind of a character, I think it brings them to life. If they're too challenging, if they're too damaged, if they're too evil, whatever it may be, I think if they're so far removed from yourself, then it just becomes too difficult to make them A, plausible, and B, um, I think it just slows everything down because you're having to second guess everything. I can kind of, it sounds slightly schizophrenic, but I can think in the mind. I can sort of switch my mindset to the various characters in the books because they're not a million miles away from people I know, and that just gives it, I think, an authenticity, which readers seem to like.
Mr. Keith, what will be your short-term and long-term goals in writing?
Well, I think once you get past your 50th birthday, long term goals are uh, yeah, you don't tend to think too long term. But actually, it's my what I'm doing for my 20th novel, which is obviously sort of a landmark, is I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I will be heading across to America in 3 weeks, and the idea is there to write a book. It's a novel, and I'm so excited. It's probably as excited as I've been about any book I've written. And part of the reason of going over there is I seem to have sort of picked up accidentally a modest readership in the US. That was never my intention because my books are really quite British in the tone and the language. So somehow over the last 8-9 years, I've picked up a small but loyal band of American readers, and I think, well, maybe if that's an avenue to explore. Push myself out of my comfort zone. I think again, it's very easy to sit, doing this job, and it is a job at the end of the day. You sit down at your desk and you sit for 8 hours a day, and your world can become very small. You're just listening to the voices in your head. So it's kind of there's two reasons for doing the trip. Firstly, is inspiration for the next book, because a large chunk of it will be set in America. But also just to sort of refuel my creative my creative batteries. They definitely need a recharge, and who knows? I'm a great believer in fate can sometimes take you off in different directions. So that the potential of what's going to go on while I'm over there is hugely exciting, and yeah, I can't wait to get over there, and indeed I've made a start on the book itself, and it starts off in the UK, and the protagonist will find himself. I haven't been to America for 27, 28 years, and I'm imagining it's probably changed a little bit. So it's going to be an experience for me, as it will be for the protagonist. So there's a lot of the sort of the minutiae of, we're two countries separated by one common language, I believe is the term. So yeah, I think that will prove an interesting experience. But yeah, the idea is that hopefully that book can sort of gain a bit of traction in America. I'd like to do more over there, book clubs. I've done a book club recently, which was great fun with an American audience. Yeah, and I'd like to do a few more bits and pieces over there for sure.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Keith, and looking for more success. What will be your advice for those people out there who want to write their first book?
That's a great question. I would say ask yourself before you write a single word, ask yourself why you're writing that book. Because if you don't know why you're writing it, you don't know how to write it. Um, I'll just explain a little bit deeper on that. So I wrote my first book for two reasons, right? First one, because it was just a tick on a bucket list. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. And the second reason was kind of like a bet I had with some friends. You know, we were out having a few beers one night and we made a bet because I'd been talking about writing a book for a number of years, and it finally got down to the point where somebody put money on the table and said, you know, I bet you don't write this book. So there was two reasons. Um, but if that book had, you know, once I'd finished it and published it, that was that as far as I was concerned. There was no, I had no intention of becoming an author, no intention of writing any more books. That was my motivation. So I knew what I was doing, and it was just a happy accident that people seemed to like that first book and it went on to sell really well. But so many people, they start writing a book and they don't know why they're doing it. They don't know what they want. And I think that's quite key, because if you don't know what you want, which direction do you go? Some people, some budding authors, they want the validation of having a traditional publishing deal. You know, they want to sign up with a big name publisher. They want to see their books on the shelves of bookstores, and that's kind of what they want. Other people driven by money. You know, they look at it purely from a business perspective. They have a product, they create a product, and they want to shift as many units of that product as possible. Some people just want to write because they love writing. Some people do it because they feel they have one story to tell. So there's a myriad reasons why people would want to write a book. But if you don't know what your motivation is or why you're doing it, I think that makes it very hard to decide which way you go with your writing, because I think a lot of people have this sort of dreamy idea that they'll write a book and suddenly it'll be picked up by a publisher and it will sell in the millions, and Netflix will come calling and it'll be turned into a movie or a series, and they have this kind of dream about what would happen. And I think if you've got, I mean, it's lovely to have a dream, but you might as well just buy a ticket for the lottery and hope, because you save yourself, you know, a couple of thousand hours of hard work. um, and the odds would be no different. It's yeah. So the advice would be decide or work out why you're writing, and then you can decide what you want to write.
Definitely. And thank you for your advice, Mr. Keith. And what was the most emotionally challenging scene for you to write in the fourth
Um,
clause?
oh, that's a very good question. I would guess there. Now, this is something that was based on a real experience. I've mentioned the character Tina, who was the sort of administrator, secretary working in. She relays an incident that happened to her. Now, it's always very difficult when you get into certain subjects, because a lot of my work is humorous, but occasionally, you know, some level of poignancy, or you have to brush upon or brush up against certain subjects which are a bit more delicate, and that I find is that's the biggest challenge in my writing. But I think these elements are important. But there was an incident that Tina was involved in where she was in the office alone one day, and a guy was standing looking in the window. And I won't go into too much detail because I wouldn't want to upset any of your audience. But something that this guy does is uh, deeply unsettling for Tina. So much so that she has to call the police. And again, that was based on a real event that happened in the early 90s. And that it was very. I knew about this event, this incident, but trying to get that down in a book that made it sound authentic, even though it was a real event. That and that was a tricky part to do. But actually, I received an email last week from a lovely woman who had read it and said that she was really touched by the way that it was portrayed and the character. Yeah, so that's always rewarding to hear that you've managed to sort of navigate one of these sort of trickier parts of a story and do it sensitively and keep it in tone with the rest of the book.
Well done, Mr. Keith. Well done. But before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Abstract Essay in its fifth season, Abstract Poetry in second season, Book 101 Review for sure, a fifth season, Comedy 101 is second season, and of course, Food 101 in its fifth season too, Geography 101 in third season, as well as my love letters, my baby podcast, Mental Health 101 and Movie 101 review in its third season, as well as my Music 101. So please do listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Keith, how did writing a sequel compare to writing the first book? Easier, harder, or different?
Well, the one thing they never tell you when you set off and you decide that you want to become an author is that your ability to write is very much dictated by your life and your personal emotional journey, because life is not one happy constant plane. And as it turned out, during the writing of the fourth clause, my father passed away, and within a couple of weeks of him passing away, which obviously a very sad event, my first granddaughter arrived. So there was a real sort of emotional swing, and trying to write through various sort of these highs and lows that we all experience in life. It's not easy. It's definitely challenging. And I don't think it was. I mean, the book itself was a hard one to write because I was following on from another book, so it means referencing back an awful lot. And and again, because it's time travel, that in itself makes it complicated. But you throw in some bereavement, a newborn baby, the general sort of ebb and flow of life that we all experience on a day-to-day basis. It's yeah, and I think this is what people have to realize. Everyone assumes that that writers, authors have this sort of wonderful life where we sort of wander around, we sit in coffee shops and wait for the muse to strike, and it's this peaceful, beautiful existence. But it's not. A lot of it is sitting down at a keyboard every day and forcing out the words when you really don't feel like it. And it's sometimes you've got to write funny stuff when you're not feeling funny. You've got to write sad stuff when you're already feeling a bit glum. It's challenging. And this particular book here, as I say, because of what was going on in my life, the seas were fairly turbulent. So it was good to bring the ship home in the end. I can tell you, it was. I don't think I've ever been so relieved to finally to write the end at the end of a book.
Mr. Keith A. Pearson, thank you so much for sharing your books to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Absolutely. If you want to go on to Amazon, go to just look up my name, Keith A. Pearson, or you can Google me, Keith A. Pearson.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Keith A. Pearson, because if you support him, more and more and more best-selling novels to come. So, Mr. Keith, thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you.
Bodycam people, see you soon.